Hello everybody, welcome to Oschersleben in Germany for rounds 11 and 12 of the 2016 TCR International Series. And our first broadcast session this weekend is Free Practice 2, the second 30-minute free practice session. We've already had FP1 this morning, and it was Matto Homola of the B3 racing team who was quickest on that occasion. Over the next couple of days, free practice 2 and qualifying today, and then 2 races tomorrow. That's our championship leader, the joker that is Stefano Camini. He holds a slender 1-point lead over Pepe Oriola after a disappointing weekend a fortnight ago in Austria for the Spaniard. A problem in race 1, a technical problem, we think to do with the wastegate, the turbo wastegate, meant he didn't even start race 2. But we've moved to this. One of the shortest tracks, if not the shortest track of the season, 3.696 kilometers of Oschersleben in what used to be East Germany. We're midway between Hanover and Berlin. Race durations, 17 laps tomorrow, but this 30-minute free practice session will give us an idea of what potentially lies in store. Of course, we mustn't read too much into free practice. I mentioned Matto Homola. Quickest this morning, half a second quicker than Oriola. But of course, we don't know at the moment what the tyre situation is. Are they on new tyres? Are they on part warns? If they are on part warns, well, how worn are they? So not a great deal we can draw from these 2 free practice sessions, but it'll be a good chance to introduce the runners and riders to you. David Kajaya, an extremely popular Georgian driver, was usually to be found in the scraps somewhere. He's come off worst more than one occasion so far this season, but he's holding his own in the rough and tumble of touring car racing. And a very busy weekend it is here in Oschersleben because TCR Germany has 2 races of the German F4 Championship and various other historic and minis and all sorts of things. That is Nicholas Maxin, 21-year-old, one of the new faces to introduce you to. He's driving for the Liqui-Moly Team Engstler Volkswagen team here in Oschersleben. And 16 drivers take the starts. A few familiar names, a few unfamiliar names. Antti Buri, the Finn you see at the bottom of your screen. Buri, a spectacular debut for him in Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium, where he completed the lockout of the podium positions for the Leopard racing team. Buri on that occasion in a Volkswagen. Here in Oschersleben he is in a Seat and is the busiest man of the weekend because not only is he taking part in 2 TCR international races, but he's also competing in the 2 TCR German races, all 4 races in that Seat. So I wonder what state the LMS racing car will be in at the end of the weekend. You also saw there the American flag, Gary Sheehan, who I'm sure we'll see at some point in this half-hour session, the 3rd American driver to take part in the TCR International Series, along with Kevin Gleason, a regular last year and sadly missing, hopefully to return to the West Coast Racing team at some point this year. Rob Holland, also part of the TCR International Series at the end of last year, raced in Macau, and Rob very much involved with the bid to get the Ford Focuses back to TCR International. So hopefully we'll see Rob and the Ford Focuses return later in the year. Mikhail Grachov, twice winner, including a surprise win for the Russian last time out in the Salzburg Ring. And bear in mind, we are only, what, 4 minutes, less than 4 minutes away from the start of the session. That car, I suspect, isn't going to be ready to go out at the beginning of the session. So, as I said, 16 cars entered here in Oschersleben. Problems for one of them in free practice 1 this morning. If we could possibly take a look at what's happening down at the Mulsanne racing area to see whether both of the Alfa Romeo Giuliettas will be going out. Let's catch up, though, with one of the team bosses, Gregor Pettersson from West Coast Racing.
Gregor Pettersson, your feelings at the start of this weekend? Difficult free practice 1, huh?
Yes, very difficult. And we are starting maybe to get the hang of it now, but we will have to try harder.
Is it a problem of setup of tires? What exactly?
Yes, it's a problem with the combination of all.
But I'm sure that in the races you will be fighting for victory again.
We hope so, but as you know, the weather forecast is rather difficult, so we just have to wait and see what happens here.
Thank you. All the best.
Thank you, Gregor. Talking to Alfredo, who's our man in the pits this weekend. And Gregor, always a man to let you know if there's a problem. And his lead driver, Gianni Morbidelli, they're fifth in the championship standings after 10 rounds. But look, 5 drivers split by just 13 points. Matteo Homola 5 adrift, but just 1 point separates the 2 great rivals from last year. Stefano Camini leads from Pepe Oriola, James Nash 3rd, Jean-Carl Venet 4th, then it's Morbidelli, Homola, Sergei Avanassiev 7th, Aku Pelinen, no longer with us, of course, in the series, but a brilliant start to the year for the young Finn, then Mikhail Grachov 9th, and Dusan Borkovic. I've just presented him with the Hawkers Fan Award for that amazing overtake maneuver in Salzburgering a fortnight ago. Dusan Borkovic 11th. Then it's Attila Tassi, again from the B3 racing team. Jordi Oriola, Pepe's younger brother, not with us this weekend. And there you saw briefly Antti Buri, 1 race meeting. And for him so far, he's back with us in Oschersleben this weekend. There is Gianni Morbidelli's car. And I think the hopes were high before the weekend that the Hondas would like it here. Gianni described Oschersleben to me yesterday as a bit of a Mickey Mouse track and a little concerned. Turn 1 is potentially where a lot of the problems could occur. We'll take a look at it once the session starts in exactly a minute's time. But turn 1 is effectively a very narrow 90-degree left-hand bend that leads into a long, long 180-degree hairpin effectively at turn 2. And concerns already being expressed about front tyres, particularly front left, because of that long right-hand turn 2. Grachov still out of the car at the moment, the West Coast Racing mechanics, obviously having changed something after FP1, and the repairs still going on. So Grachov won't be there at the start of the session. And I mentioned early on that there are also concerns over one of the 2 Alfa Romeos, Peter Fullin, in the second Mulsanne Racing Alpha. Brilliant time from him in FP1, 4th quickest, but big concerns over the engine. Clouds of smoke from the back of the car earlier, and they've already changed the engine once this weekend, so Fullin telling me that he's rather concerned as to the state of the engine and also concerns about the gearbox, because it seems to be doing its own thing, changing up or down without commands. And Michele Ceruti, yes, there is Fullin, so good news for Mulsanne Racing. They've got both the Alphas out. Miki Ceruti was saying that her car occasionally will refuse to go down the box and then refuse to go up the box. So some kind of electronic glitches in their gearboxes. And once those glitches are ironed out, both drivers are saying that the car has massive potential, and they seem to be ticking off the problems one by one. And so we keep our fingers crossed that that little Alpha, which certainly seems to be the fans' favourite, judging by the reaction on social media, that will become more and more competitive as the season goes on. Also still in the pits, Matteo Homola, as he leaves, a 1:35.354. His time from FP1 this morning. The fact that the first 6 drivers were covered by less than a second, but if you take away that half a second advantage that Homola had over Pepe Oriola, then it's something like 11, 12 drivers covered by less than a second. And as I was saying earlier, it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens once everybody is on the same fresh rubber, because who knows what tyres Matteo Homola was on. I suspect he went out on a fresh set right at the end of the session. Grachov, 9th in the points table. Bonnet finally closed. Simon, his engineer there in the white shirt, just keeping a weather eye on what's happening. As Peter Fullin weaves to get some heat into those tyres. That could potentially be an issue here this weekend. We've already briefly touched on the fact that front tyres, particularly front left, could be an issue. But from what some of the drivers are saying, it's very difficult because of the type of tarmac here at Oschersleben to actually get and sustain heat in your tyres. There aren't that many long straights here, the start-finish straight and also the back straight between turns 10 and 11. There's a very short straight between 12 and 13, and then another quick sprint from 13 down to the final corner at 14. But otherwise, the first 10 turns pretty much are all very tight, very twisty affairs, with turn 1 being the most fearsome of all. And Tony Whitaker, race director, during his briefing to the drivers last night, pointing out that going into turn 1 on lap 1, if they're 3 or 4 abreast, someone will be going into the gravel at turn 1. So you can't really put it more clearly than that, as James Nash just gets a little bit of a drift on, just getting it slightly sideways. Now that's the chicane at turns 8 and 9, and the Oschersleben management, the clerk of the course, has already said that he's got an observer at the chicane specifically watching for track limits. There's Mickey Cerruti. And comments being made about the honeycomb paintwork. Quite a lot of people, I think, on social media would quite prefer that car to be in the all-red paintwork that we first saw in some leaked pictures from the team a couple of weeks ago. But Michaela pointing out that the team have been very busy bees over the last few weeks, months actually, when they withdrew from the series to concentrate on developing the car. And so the honeycomb paintwork, as my colleague Ben Constanduris was talking about a fortnight ago at the Salzburg Ring, to recognize the amount of work and pay tribute to the work that's gone on by the team, as Oriola takes to the escape road. There didn't appear to be any attempt to brake for turn 1. His teammate Sergei Afanasiev in the pits. Routine at this stage of tyres being swapped around, so get some heat. Yeah, this is what I was saying. There appeared to be no attempt. There's no lock-up, no smoke from the brakes or anything, no attempt to stand on the brakes to get the car to turn in. And there he goes, straight on. And yet the car does stop. So is there a problem potentially with soft brakes? We'll see if Oriola comes into the pits at the end of this lap. So Cerruti around turn 10. This is the long back straight I was telling you about. Should be tucking in for the right-hander at turn 11. Cerruti's just set the best Sector 2 time of all, and that's one of the B3 cars. That's Dusan Borkovic getting it slightly wrong. Just over 5 minutes of the session gone then. Michaela Cerruti topping the timesheets at the moment. And that's a 1:39.094 from Cerruti. Fullin has gone quicker in the other Alpha, a 1:37.9. Bear in mind that we've seen 1:35s, 1:34s so far this weekend. There were 6 test sessions on Thursday. Joint test sessions, most of them with TCR International and TC Germany. Josh Files, the young British driver in TCR Germany, topping the first couple of practice sessions in the TCR Germany target competition Honda Civic. But at the end of the session, the sessions 5 and 6 were just for the TCR International cars. And it was Camini and Oriola, surprise, surprise, the old rivals, both breaking the 1:35 lap time barrier. Time's beginning to come down. Hommel are now back at the top of the timesheets with a 1:36.894. Then it's Fullin, a 1:37.9. Cerruti, a 1:39.0. Antti Buri, the young Hungarian driver, a 1:39.3. And then Nicholas Makshin, the 21-year-old. Oh, there is Greg Sheehan. Gary Sheehan, excuse me, in the other of the Liqui Moly Engstler cars going straight on at turn 1. So already turn 1 causing a few moments for some of the drivers as we look at Petter Fullin. Quick times in both sectors 1 and 2. A 1:36.687 from Petter Fullin puts him to the top of the leaderboard ahead of Mato Homola. Then it's Oriola. Then Makshin, 4th. Cerruti and Buri dropped to 5th and 6th. Borkovic currently 7th. Sheehan, we saw a moment ago, in 8th, which is a great performance so far until you actually look at the times and you realise that it's a 1:54. So representative times not being set so far. We'll take a look at Gary Sheehan, I suspect, in a moment. Quite a bit to talk about. And you saw there Oriola running wide across the curbs. Track limits will be an issue potentially yet again this weekend. Yellow flags at turn 1. Now, I don't know why. Is somebody in the gravel potentially at turn 1? Now, that's Nicholas Makshin, I mentioned, 21 years old. And he's currently doing the European Touring Car Cup, but in the Super 1600 category in a Fiesta. Won it last year, leading it at the moment. And the decision made very sensibly by Liqui Moly Team Engstler on their home patch to run 3 cars, 1 for Makshin, and very late the deal was done for Gary Sheehan, who came over to test initially the LMS car of Antti Buri, the LMS Racing Seat Leon. And the announcement made yesterday that Sheehan would be driving the 3rd Liqui Moly car. But at the moment, it's Makshin who is upholding team honours, 5th quickest. Homola back on top, a 1:36.164, so there's a little way to go. And there is Jean-Carl Vernet, who was he was saying, oh, it wasn't a great surprise that he won in Salzburg Ring last time out, but to be honest, I think everybody else thought it was a surprise. It was the rain, the torrential rain that fell in race 2, which was the great leveller. And the comment being made beforehand was that the aerodynamics of the Volkswagen Golf GTI TCR not as good as the Seat Leon on which it's based. The underpinnings very much the same, as Dusan Borkovic now goes 5th quickest with a time of 1:38.093. Morbidelli 9th quickest. Avanasiev goes 3rd. Avanasiev a 1:36.9. So quickest so far, Mato Homola 1:36.164. 3/10 quicker than Petter Fullin. I was talking about Jean-Carl Vernet and the aerodynamics of the Golf. That needs to improve, I think everybody acknowledges, and Volkswagen Motorsport here in force this weekend, surprisingly enough at their home round, with a trailer full of parts for the various TCR championships that are running the Golf TCR cars. Fullin at the bottom of your screen there. Gold in sector 1, so quickest of all. Green in sectors 2 and 3, so his best lap, a 1:36.4. Still 2nd quickest behind Mato Homola. And the team, I suspect, will be hugely relieved at the work they've carried out, not only on the engine, but also on the aerodynamics of the car and a list of improvements that they've carried out, as Stefano Comini goes 3rd quickest on a 1:36.7. But John Gentry, the race engineer for Mulsanne Racing, extremely pleased with the way things are going. As we take a look at Sergei Avanasiev, gold in sectors 1 and 2. What can Avanasiev do as he comes up to cross the start-finish line? And quickest of all, surprise, surprise, gold in all 3 sectors. The first man in this sector to break the 1:36 barrier, a 1:35.622 for Sergei Avanasiev in the Craft Bamboo Lukoil Seat. So currently Avanasiev from Homola, from Fullin, from Morbidelli, Tassi, Nash, Comini, Jean-Carl Venet, Oriola and Grachov, who's now out on track, rounding off the top 10. But still quite spread out. The top 10 covered by 1.7-ish seconds at the moment. Jean-Carl Venet pops in a 1:35.7 to go second quickest behind Afanasiev. Kajaya, 8th quickest. His time a 1:36.7. But a lot of people saying before the weekend that it's the Volkswagens that should be on top this weekend because there aren't the long straights, because aerodynamics aren't such an issue. James Nash telling me yesterday when we did the preview interviews that because the Seats don't actually hit 6th gear here, it's very, very tight and twisty, particularly the first sector, first 2 sectors. And so the Volkswagen should have the upper hand. Afanasiev, though, gold in Sector 1 again. Runs slightly wide on that final right-hander onto the start-finish straight. Morbidelli, though, where did that time come from? Green in Sectors 1 and 2, gold in 3, and Morbidelli, a 1:35.433, so nearly 0.2 of a second quicker than Afanasiev. Hopefully Gregor Peterson in the West Coast Racing garage will be a lot happier with that. The Hondas seem to be heading in the right direction. James Nash, 6th quickest with a 1:35.9. Borkovic, a 1:35.8. And Venet appears to be on something of a flyer. He crosses the start-finish line now, 3rd quickest. A 1:35.629, so 0.007 of a second slower than Afanasiev. But it is Morbidelli, Honda, ahead of Afanasiev, Seat, ahead of Venet in a Volkswagen, ahead of Comini in a Volkswagen. And Fullin, currently 8th, is in the pits, as is Cerruti, you see there behind the slightly plainer coloured of the Alphas. That's going to be tricky to pick those two apart. Morbidelli then on another quick lap, already gold in Sector 1, not so good in Sector 2. And I'm hearing in my ears that it is raining out on track. The forecast for today was a mixture of cloud and showers. We're hoping for much better weather tomorrow. That's the chicane, and indeed you can see some raindrops on the lens of the camera. And Venet having backed off. And indeed they all have. In they come for wet tyres. So looking across from the commentary position here on the top of the grandstand, the spectators on the bank opposite me don't have their umbrellas up as yet. So it potentially is raining in the back part of the circuit. Yes, indeed, if you look at the camera lens and also the wipers going at the chicane, then yes, the rain getting heavier around, that's turn 10. This is the back straight down to 11. And the wipers on full for Stefano Comini. And indeed, the umbrellas now starting to open. So Morbidelli in the pits, as is Afanasiev, as is Borkovic. Tassi is in. Fullin and Homola are on outlaps, as is Kajaya, Oriola and Maxin. Cerruti is still in, Buri is still in, and Gary Sheehan is still in. So we're into the second half of this half-hour session, as that is very definitely a wet weather tyre being wheeled out. Gianni Morbidelli, quickest so far on a 1:35.433. Sergei Afanasiev, 1:35.622. Then it's Venet in the Volkswagen, Comini, Borkovic, James Nash 6th, Mato Homola 7th, Petr Fullin 8th, Attila Tassi 9th, Mikhail Grachov 10th. Then it's David Kajaya 11th. And the message coming up on the screens, the track described as officially wet between turns 4 to 10. So that's much of Sector 2 is described as wet officially. And below the top 10, Kajaya 11th, Oriola 12th, Maxin in 13th, Cerruti 14th, Antiburi 15th, and Gary Sheehan quite a long way down, a 1:54 his best lap. but only having done 2 laps in the Liqui Moly Engstler car, 16th and last at the moment. And indeed, you can see the rain coming down quite heavily now. Now, would this be helpful, I wonder? Because Free Practice 1 this morning was run in the dry, and if we're expecting a mixture of showers today, oh, Borkovic just gets it wrong and catches it. And those little bollards you see at the side of the track are collapsible, so if you hit them, they will fold. Oriola getting it all crossed up as well. Remember what I was saying about getting heat into these tyres? And a few drivers saying to us yesterday that the problem with the tarmac here at Oschersleben, it's quite a unique compound, I guess, from what they were saying, and it's very difficult to get the heat into these tyres. So 4 cars out on track at the moment. In fact, 3, as I say that. The letter P comes up on the timing screen in front of me. All drivers, all 16 drivers now in the pits. So even the ones who went out to have a look, there is John Gentry, the engineer for Mulsanne Racing, extremely experienced in both bikes and everything from Formula One right down to... I didn't actually ask him if he's ever engineered karts, but I wouldn't be at all surprised. When we spoke at the beginning of the year, he just reeled off a list of championships and a list of drivers that he's worked with on both 2 wheels and 4, as Pepe Oriola tucks in. As I was saying, is this going to help the teams have a look at a wet setup for qualifying? The test sessions on Thursday were run in a mixture of conditions. The best times there are 1:34 for both Oriola and Comini. Nobody seems to be in any hurry to go back out. And there is Gary Sheehan's car. Gary Sheehan, hugely experienced in the US Touring Car Championship, primarily based on the West Coast. Gary saying to me yesterday, he's born in New York, lives in California, not far from San Francisco. So for him, the Sonoma Raceway is his home track. He's won the US TCC on a couple of occasions, currently lies second, drives a Hyundai over there, and hugely, hugely pleased to be taking part in TCR International this weekend. That, I think, is Pepe Oriola out of the car and talking to the Craft Bamboo Lukoil engineers as to whether he thinks he should go back out. Clearly the decision has been made, since all 16 are still in the pits, that they're not going to go back out just yet. One of the Hondas, though, heading out in the background. And it is Gianni Morbidelli, the only man to leave the pit so far. Now, I don't know what the rain is doing around the back of the circuit. Certainly the last shot we saw of it was that it was coming down fairly heavily. Now that's the run down to turn 3. Turn 2, a long 180-degree right-hand hairpin. Turn 3, exactly the opposite. B3 Racing guys waiting to see what happens. There goes Borkovic joining Morbidelli out on track. The local spectators wondering what's going on. And both Tassi and Homola's cars on the ground. The thumbs up for Tassi, out he goes. Grachov also out, so 4 cars out on track at the moment. Morbidelli, there he is, in the number 10 Honda, the West Coast Racing Honda Civic. Borkovic, we saw go out, the 62 car. Let's talk to Mato Homola. He's in the pit, and he's with Alfredo Filippone.
Mato Homola, it's raining very well.
Not in the pit lane. There was a big rain. No, not a big rain, but the shower, and it was really slippery on the slick. So everybody went to the pit lane. and I think it's not necessary go out now because the track will be also slippery, and for the wet tires it's not good for to ruin them. So we are in box, so we will concentrate on qualifying.
Good, excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Alfredo. Thanks, Matto. So that's Matto's strategy then. Clearly his teammates don't agree. Dusan Borkovic there, also Attila Tassi, both out to take a look at things on wet tyres. The wipers, I was going to say have stopped, but they're on intermittent. If you look at Grachov in the background, no wipers. Just a flick of the wipers. So things aren't so wet, potentially improving at the back of the circuit in Sector 2. And is that the sound of raindrops I hear on one of the camera microphones? As the clock, though, steadily ticks down, just under 7 minutes of the session remaining. On track at present then, Morbidelli, Borkovic, Nash has gone out, Tassi, Grachov, Kajaya, and also Nicholas Makshin. Through the chicane goes Morbidelli. And you can see the tracks left by the cars going down that long back straight from turn 10 down to turn 11. Oh, no, indeed. You can see on that camera shot, the rain's still very heavy. So in Sector 3, and indeed, in comes Gianni Morbidelli. Let's head back down to the pits. Alfredo is our pit lane reporter on duty today, and I think he's got Pepe Oriola with him.
Pepe Oriola, wet track, no risk, you stay here.
Yes, unfortunately when I put a better set of tires, it started to rain. So I saw the track was a little bit too slippery to try to do any good lap time. We did a good lap time on Thursday on the dry with new tires. So in case if it's dry, we know that we have a good setup. And now it seems that it's raining more, but when I stopped it was not even dry or wet, so it was stupid to put wet tires to try to find a setup in case the qualifying will be in wet. But I think that we have the base, and yeah, now it seems to be wet. And I don't know what's happening with this year and the weather, but we have lately these problems starting to rain in the middle of the season.
You will have to do as well as La Roja this weekend.
Sorry?
You will have to do as well as the football La Roja this weekend.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. Yesterday was an amazing match. I enjoyed it a lot, and I hope that Spain will be back on the place they should be. Not like in the last World Cup, as it was a little bit ridiculous coming from 2 Euro Cups and 1 World Cup.
Thank you, all the best.
Now, I was wondering when we'd get our first football reference in. Well done, Alfredo. So I think people just tentatively having a look at the track on wet tyres, but the consensus seems to be no point in doing anything daft. Save your tyres. Oh, no, indeed, the rain really starting to come down now. And yet, looking out, the pit lane still relatively dry. It seems to be the back part of the circuit. And Oriola's absolutely right. I don't know what's happened with the TCR International Series and the weather. Well, I don't think up until the Salzburg Ring we'd had a wet race. All of last year, I think we'd had wet sessions or showers in the lead up to a race, but certainly the races themselves were dry. But that second race in the Salzburg Ring, just incredible. And Jean-Carl Vernet not complaining, because that was the equaliser. A brilliant passing manoeuvre up the back straight in Salzburg Ring by Vernet gave him the victory. And thank you very much, he says. We'll bank that to go along with wins for both Vernet and Comini earlier in the season. And so even though Bahrain might not have been the best of starts for the Leopard racing team, they've certainly got their act together now. Currently, looking at the timesheets here in Free Practice 2, Vernet third and Comini fourth. but it's still Gianni Morbidelli, 135.433, best in this session, and with the rain coming down even harder here at Oschersleben that time, definitely not to be beaten. James Nash, 6th quickest so far. Just having a look at the conditions coming down the start-finish straight. As is Attila Tassi. 2.5 minutes then of the session remaining. Gianni Morbidelli from Avanasieff, from Vernet, from Comini, from Borkovic. James Nash 6th, Homolus 7th, Fullin 8th, Tassi 9th, Grachov 10th, Kajaya 11th, Pepe Oriola there. Wondering what on earth has happened to his fortunes, 12th. Makshin 13th, Cerruti 14th, Buri 15th, and Gary Sheehan only able to do 2 laps in this session, 16th. But it is very good to see Peter Fullin back out. He was saying that in the test session on Thursday, the car decided to go from 4th gear to 1st, all on its own, in something like 0.05 of a second. They buzzed the engine, and so as a precaution, changed the engine and gearbox. And during FP1 this morning, just saw a puff of smoke, cloud of blue smoke at the back of the car, so pulled over just in case. And he said, we don't have any more spare engines. So he was concerned that he wouldn't be able to make FP2, but there indeed he is. And there is Michele Cerruti in the other car. The time away from the TCR International Series appears to have paid off for Mulsanne Racing. They've come back not only stronger, but with another driver, with Peter Fullin, and I think that was an inspired move by the team. So the 2 drivers now can bounce off each other rather than Michele Cerruti doing all the development work on her own. And also I know that there's been a lot of interest in buying the car for other championships, so the team having to make that difficult decision of developing the car whilst also looking at making money from it by building others to sell. But all seems to be back on track. Unfortunately, we were hoping for the Subaru to be back here in Oschersleben. We were told in Imola that the Top Run Racing's team manager, Renato Russo, came to Imola and said 99% we will be at the Salzburg Ring. Well, it didn't appear there. It didn't appear here in Oschersleben. But we are hearing that development work is going on, assisted now by Subaru themselves. And so fingers crossed we will see the Subaru WRX STI TCR, to give it its full title, return to the series before too long. The Fords I touched on earlier in the session. So session over. What has Jean-Carl Vernet got to say? He's with Alfredo.
Jean-Carl Vernet, changing conditions all the time in Oschersleben this weekend.
Yeah, it looks it's gonna be tricky this weekend, and we don't know what we're gonna have this afternoon for qualifying. But no, it was until now it's pretty good test station for us. We are quite performant, so let's see how it goes this afternoon.
But we have seen in previous races that you are not afraid by the rain.
I like the rain. I mean, for when it's raining, the level of each car is pretty much the same, and then we have to make the difference. So, I mean, on the dry, we looks okay. On the wet, I'm sure we're gonna be okay also. So, let's see. We don't decide about the forecast. We just have to stay focused on our job and continue this.
Thank you. And actually, it's true. We don't decide about the weather.
Thank you, Alfredo. Jean-Carl Vernet, just under 0.2 of a second off the pace set by Gianni Morbidelli. But there at the side of your screen, confirmation of the top times. Gianni Morbidelli heading back to the pits at the end of the session. Quickest on a 1:35.433. And let's have a look. 9 drivers split by a fraction over a second, right the way down to Attila Tassi. Grachov, a further 0.2 down, and then Kajaya, 0.04 slower than Grachov. So, as ever, Everything very evenly matched. Lots of drivers breathing down each other's necks. But I was saying right at the start of the session, we don't know exactly what tyres people were out on, exactly what was going on. The first time we find that out is in the qualifying session this afternoon. Two-stage qualifying as ever. 14:15 Central European time. The qualifying one session, excuse me, starts, and that's the usual. That's 20 minutes, a short break, and then a 10-minute thrash is Q2 to decide the grid order for race 1 tomorrow and the reversed grid for race 2. And that's a man who's won twice already this year. The switch to West Coast Racing and the Honda has really paid off for Mikhail Grachov. Gianni Morbidelli seems a little off key this weekend. He's quite philosophical. He's still in the scrap for the title, 5th at the moment. But, you know, he's had his problems. That Imola shunt with Alain Menu in the other car. And the ghost in the car, as we've mentioned on more than one occasion, where the power steering will just throw a little glitch now and again just to catch the driver out. We think, from what the team are telling us, that the issue has been sorted out. But the confidence hopefully will return this weekend. And quickest in FP2 will have done his confidence no harm at all. Grachov 10th quickest, a 1:36.686. So there are our times then, a 1:35.433 for Morbidelli, ahead of Avanasiev, Vernet, Comini, Borkovic, Nash, Homola, Fullin, Tassi, and Grachov, rounding off the top 10. 11th is Kajaya, 12th is Oriola, Makshin 13th, Cerruti 14th, Antiburi 15th, and Gary Sheehan there in 16th. The Stars and Stripes making a welcome return to the TCR International Series entry list. And I wonder if Kevin Gleeson is watching this back at home in Pennsylvania, keeping his fingers crossed that he'll be rejoining us later in the year. Alfredo, though, is with our quickest man in this session, Gianni Morbidelli.
Gianni Morbidelli, two very different sessions this morning. It's going better now.
Yeah, seems better, but we struggle a lot with the temperature of the tires. That's why we are a little bit worried, because we cannot put the temperature on tires. Was quite good. Not enough, not enough. We have to improve, but the condition will be extremely strange during the qualifying. So we are looking the weather forecast, so we don't know. On the wet condition, I was quite happy. The handling of the car was quite good. So let's see. Will be a question mark for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Good luck.
A downbeat Gianni Morbidelli, despite setting the quickest time in that session, but a session of two halves. The dry saw that 1:35 lap time, and then came the rain. We will see you for qualifying this afternoon, but for now, from Oschersleben, goodbye.